welcome to Budding Cooks. I'm Betsy. I'm an intern here at the Cooperative Extension Office and a student at AB Tech in their culinary program. We're going to work on our green beans and tomato recipe today. The fun thing about this recipe is we're going to use some different knife cuts. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how we do that. So for starters, we have our bell pepper. I just cut it around the seeds just so it's nice and clean, scooped out any leftover seeds. So you can see it's not terribly flat, which can be a little bothersome, but it'll work. So you're just going to cut a little slice. You're just going to put a little bit of pressure on your knife. Go forward, then back. Forward, then back. Oops, a little more pressure. Pressure, forward and back. And you'll just keep going with that. And you're just going to make little strips, like you might see in a stir fry or fajita, stuff like that. And we got our tomatoes. Those are just diced up. So the way that those work, you take one of these slices, then you're just going to go across. Down and back, down and back, down and back. You're going to get these nice little squares, and that's how we get that cut. For the green beans, what I did, just very simple. You just cut the ends off and peel any stem off that's there. Make sure they're rinsed really well, because they can get really dirty too. Now for the onions. Onions are a little weird, because they're round. So you're going to slice your onion in half, so it's got this flat part here. Then you're going to make slices along here. So one slice, just not all the way through, but most of the way. Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3 pieces that way. We're going to cut almost all the way the other way. So what I've got here is cuts that way. And you're going to see that they start to pull apart just a little bit. So we've got our cuts set up. You can see the little squares and rectangles there. So we're going to take that part and we're just going to cut down and back, down and back. That's going to give you those little square pieces of onion that you're used to. So I'm going to set these aside and put my knife up because I don't need my knife anymore. A lot of accidents can happen when you leave a knife out, especially if you leave it in a sink. That can be really dangerous. In water where you can't see it, somebody could reach in and grab the sharp end for the blade, or even it could fall off the counter and cut your feet. So you just have to be really careful when you're working with sharp knives. So, we've got all our stuff ready to go, and I have a really big saucepan / pot. So I'm going to turn the heat on just a little bit. You want to heat up the pan a little bit before you add your oil, just so that everything cooks correctly. I'm going to give it just a minute. Now one thing you might notice, on this stove, we've got 2 sizes of stove eyes. We've got a big one and a little one, and a big one and a little one. These are for different sizes of pots and pans. If you're using a little egg pan, it'll fit nicely on one of the small ones, but something bigger like this is going to have to go on the large eyes. This is the heating element. So when you're cooking something, you want the heat to to get the whole pan. So if I put this one on a tiny eye, you can see about half the pan's not going to get that heat. So you definitely want to have it on an eye that is really comparable in size. That's just something you learn as you go with the different pots and pans that you have. So I'm going to add the oil. We're going to let it heat up just a little bit, not too much. But you don't want cold oil because that's just going to make your food soggy. The next thing we're going to add is going to be the onions. So we're going to cook these until they're translucent. So right now you can see they're pretty white. So we're going to add them to the oil and we're just going to cook until we can see through them. That's what translucent means. So they're going to be clear as we cook. Get every piece in there. One thing you want to be very careful about is making sure that everything is evenly distributed in your pan. You don't want something like that where everything's in one corner because the top won't cook. So you just want a thin layer around the bottom. Make sure they touch the oil. Everybody's got a little bit. Everybody's got room to get that heat. That's one problem with things that are all bunched up. The heat can't get to every piece. You can only cook the bottom or only cook the side. So you just want to make sure that everything is always covered and has its room to get the heat and the oil. So we're just going to keep an eye on these. They're already starting to cook. If you've ever had like grilled onions or something on a sandwich, you know they're wetter. They're not as crunchy as like onions you get on a hamburger or onion rings sometimes. So that's basically what we're looking for. We want a softer onion. We don't want the hard crunch. We want to bring some of the sugar out that's in it. And that's going to help it cook and give it a nice flavor to go with the rest of our ingredients. I just go over every once in a while, flip them over, make sure all the sides are done. That way every piece gets cooked and on every side. That's one thing you see, especially when you cook with meats. You want to make sure that all the sides have a nice crust on it. So you just have to check and make sure everything is where it needs to be to get access to the fat that you're using, whether it's an oil or butter or even shortening, and also to the heat source. So if I have a piece of onion up on the side of the pan, that's not going to get the heat. So that one's not going to cook. So just make sure that everything has its spot. So we can see the onions are getting nice and translucent. So they're not harsh white. They've just got a nice little see-through appearance. And you want to make sure that they don't get very brown, because that's not what we're going for in this one. In other recipes, you may brown onions, but today we're just going to leave them the way they are. We're going to add our garlic. We're just going to cook it just a little bit. Garlic can burn really, really easily, so you want to make sure you stir it really well and don't overcook it, because burnt garlic is never tasty. So you're going to cook it, and really, once you start to really smell the garlic flavor, or garlic scent, not flavor, you're going to be just about where you want to be. Heat can activate certain smells, so when you have spices and you toast them, once you can really smell the spices that you're working with, or what we call aromatics, which are like onions, garlic, shallots, stuff like that, that's when you know that you're right where they need to be. So got that going. And I don't want my spoon to melt, so I'm going to make sure I keep it out of the pan, because it could melt due to the heat from the pan. If it was a metal spoon or spatula, it could transfer the heat and it would burn me. So really, no matter what kind you're using, you just want to take it out of the pan and don't leave it on the sides just sitting there. So the next thing we are going to add is the rest of our vegetables. So we're going to add green beans, tomatoes, and green peppers. And we want to make sure that you get a bite of each item. So we're going to make sure that we mix them really well together. We're going to mix this in. Make sure the onions and tomatoes are really good friends. Everyone's hanging out together. We're going to add our green beans. Make sure those get distributed the way they should. Make sure the tomatoes and onions are all around those beans. Once they get a little softer when they cook, it's going to be a lot easier. So this is really about even distribution at this point. And we're going to add our pepper slices. We're going to do the same thing with those. Just try to get it as mixed as well as you can. And they're going to cook down and get softer, so it's just going to be a little bit easier later on. So we've got everybody hanging out together in here. Now for salt and pepper, you might notice on the recipe it says to taste, and that just means how much you like. If your family isn't doing any sodium in their diet, you might not add any salt. If you guys really like salt, you've worked really hard and you need to build up your salt again, you can put a lot in there. And the same for pepper. If you and your family really like pepper, you can put a whole lot in there. If you don't, just a little bit. It really just depends on what you like to eat. So we've got that in there, and it's sprinkled over everything, but I'm still going to give it a toss just to make sure that the stuff on the bottom gets some salt and pepper. And that salt is also going to help bring out some of the moisture from the food and help the rest of it cook. All right, so all of that is in there, and I'm gonna add my 2 cups of water. I'm just gonna pour it all over. Then I'm gonna turn up the heat just a little bit because we want to bring this to a boil. Boiling is gonna help all these harder vegetables, the green beans and the peppers, break down a lot easier without compromising the cooking that we've already done with the onions and garlic. So we're just gonna mix, mix, and mix. You can see the liquid starting to change colors a little bit because the tomato juice and everything. So everybody is set. I'm just gonna put the lid on and wait for it to boil, and we'll be back. Welcome back. It has started to boil, just a little bubbling here. That's what we're looking for, just to get that heat throughout. It can take a while for the water to heat up because there's so much stuff there. So I'm gonna reduce the heat just a little bit so that it's just simmering, so not a full boil. We're gonna let it sit for 15 minutes, and then we're gonna come back and see if everything's cooked. Welcome back. We've waited the correct amount of time for everything to cook, so we're gonna check it. But first of all, look at the pot. You see the handle is sticking out towards me and off of the counter space? You definitely want to make sure that you've got it turned. That way, if someone's running around behind you, or if you turn around too quickly, you don't catch it and knock everything over and burn yourself. We don't want to get hurt when we're in the kitchen. Another way we don't want to get hurt in the kitchen is by steam. You would think that steam, it's pretty much invisible, it's not going to hurt me. But a steam burn can actually hurt worse than a regular burn. So when you open something that's been simmering or boiling, there's going to be a lot of steam buildup. So when you open, you want to open away from you and let all that steam escape. See all that? Oh my gosh. You don't want that coming at your face at all. Another thing is your towel or your oven mitt or whatever you're using. When you've got a pot, sometimes the handle can get really hot. So you want to use a dish towel or an oven mitt to turn it around or to pick up the handle just in case something's hot. But you want to make sure that your towel is nice and dry. You don't want a wet one because the moisture will conduct the heat and it will actually burn you worse than if you just grabbed it with your hand. So always just be very careful of these little things that can make your cooking experience so much better. So we've got all of our vegetables. They have cooked down really well. There's a lot less moisture than there was because all that steam has helped cook all the vegetables down, so I can move those beans really freely, and those peppers are nice and soft. So this is a dish you want to serve hot. You don't want to hurt anybody with the heat, but you definitely don't want it to sit around and get cold. So I'm just going to turn the stove off, and then I'm going to just pull it right out of the pan. You don't need all the liquid. You can add it if you'd like and make it more of like a stew or a soup. But I'm just going to use tongs and transfer the beans over, and the the tomatoes, and the onions, and the garlic, and the peppers, all that good stuff. Now when you go to plate your food, you want to make sure that you've got a little bit of everything. So like I noticed that I don't have as many tomatoes in my bowl as I'd like, because it adds nice color and nice flavor, and I want my guests to get a little pint of everything. So I'm just going to go around, make sure that I've got a bowl full of all the different vegetables so that I can give my guest a real overarching taste of what I've made. So you can do that with your soups and stews. Make sure you've got your vegetables and your meat so that they can taste. If you're doing a beef stew, you want them to have chunks of the beef, you want to have some carrot pieces, potato pieces, celery pieces, all that, so that all of the work that you've done really shows in your plate to your guests. So enjoy your green beans and tomatoes, and we'll see you next time.